Well, today is a special day. We have the opportunity to talk to one of the great Oklahomans of all time, Henry Bellmon, former governor, former senator, head of large agencies, and as he says, just a farmer. How are you today?
I'm good.
Great. We're gonna talk a little bit about your life. I want to talk about some of the obvious political things, but we want to get a little more into your background and start with your family. I mean, were you born in Billings?
I was born in a farm east of Tonkawa. My mother went up to be with her sister-in-law while I was being born. So
I see.
We still lived out on the farm by Billings, but I was actually born up at Tonkawa.
But you were raised on that farm.
I still live there.
I'll be darned. Talk about where your family came from and how they ended up in northern Oklahoma.
My dad was from Sedan, Kansas. He'd been born up by Pittsburgh, and then his father took the family out to what was in no man's land, and they lived in a dugout on the bank of the Beaver River for 5 years, and he worked as a ranch hand, and he and his dad picked up buffalo bones and hauled them up to Liberal, Kansas, and made their living with selling buffalo bones.
What do you do with buffalo bones?
You make whitewash.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Well, I've already learned something.
And then when he was about 15, they came back to Kansas and lived in Sedan. And he got married, and when they opened the Cherokee Strip, he was only 19, so he couldn't make the run, but he came down later and paid another fella who had a claim $700 to relinquish his rights to my dad, and that's where we lived.
How many acres was that?
160.
So it was just the Homestead Act.
Yeah.
Did you have to be 21 to make the run? Was that the rule?
That's the way I understand it.
Yeah. So, and then you had siblings.
Well, I had many siblings. My father's, he and his first wife had 7 girls and 2 boys. And then his first wife died on Armistice Day in 1918. And he married my mother a couple of years later, and there were 4 boys in that family. So there were 13 of us altogether.
Were you all on the farm? What was the age spread?
Oh, I don't remember, but it was considerable.
But were you all on the farm at the same time?
Not at the same time.
Yeah.
My mother's family were from Iowa. They came down in 1907, statehood year. They came in a covered wagon and made a kind of a picnic out of the trip. It took them a couple of 3 weeks to come down, and she'd been and was a teacher. She taught school in the one-room schoolhouses for about 20 years. And then after she was married, she stayed home and looked after her family. And then when World War II came by, they were short of school teachers. So she got a job as a teacher at Banner and walked 3 miles a day each way to Banner to teach the 8th grades.
I'll be darned. So you went to school in, did you go to school in a one-room schoolhouse?
Glenrose.
In Glenrose?
Yeah.
All the grades were in there together?
8 grades.
8?
There was a little oil boom there at the time, and there was about 40-some kids in that school when I went there, and had 1 teacher in 8 grades.
And and the same teacher taught what, math,
Yeah.
English, all
Everything.
the subjects?
Everything.
And
Didn't call it math, it was arithmetic.
arithmetic.
Yeah.
And did the other older students help the younger kids?
Not intentionally.
So after the 8th grade, did you go in high school?
I went to Marland, which was 12 miles east of where we live. Marland had school buses, and Billings didn't. We live in the Billings district, but Marland let us drive their school buses. And I went to Marland for 3 years, and then last year Billings got school buses, and I went to school at Billings and graduated there.
I see. So what year was that?
38.
1938. Of course, the drums of war had begun to beat in Europe.
Not really. Well, yes, in Europe, but not here. We weren't interested in their war.
Is that right?
Yeah. At least I wasn't. I was prime draft age.
So when you got out of high school, you really weren't particularly concerned with what was going on?
The war wasn't a big thing with people my age. that was in 38. I came to OSU in the fall of 38 and graduated here. And I got my classwork all done in January of 41.
So it was Oklahoma A&M, not too
Yes.
far from home.
40 miles.
How did you? What made your decision to come to Oklahoma? Now Oklahoma State University.
It was close. It was an ag school, and I wanted to study agriculture.
So you want to stay in the farming business?
Yeah. And it didn't seem like it was going to cost as much as it would to go to OU. My dad wanted me to be a lawyer. Wanted me to be a lawyer.
Was that right?
He didn't think there was much future to farming. He'd been at it all his life, and he knew what he was talking about.
What do you think? But you decided to come here and study agronomy?
Yes.
And what was it like at Oklahoma State?
Well, it was very different. There were probably not over 10 automobiles on campus. And everybody was hard up, didn't have a lot of money. Wasn't much social life. They had dances at the girls' dorms. You could go for an hour on weeknights. And I joined what was called the Aggie Co-op. We hired a cook, and she cooked the meals and bought the groceries and charged us a very proportionate share of the bill. It cost about $12 a month for food.
Where did you live?
I lived at first in a rooming house. It cost me $6 a month for a room.
Was it close to campus?
It was at the corner of Monroe and 6th.
And then, did you ever live on campus in any of the dorms?
No,
or
never did.
Were there dorms then?
Yes, there were dorms, not big ones. Murray was there. Willard was built while I was here, I think. There weren't many dorms for men.
How many students were here approximately in those days?
I would have to guess, but I'd say 8,000, somewhere in that range.
Did you find that the preparation that you received at that one-room schoolhouse through the 8th grade and then at Marlin and Billings prepared you for college?
Oh, probably not, but it didn't take long to catch up. I didn't like college, didn't like being cupped up, and I liked being out of doors. But so I took a heavy course, and I got jobs and worked my way through.
Where'd you work?
Well, the first job I got was picking pears for a lady on Monroe Street. She had a couple of pear trees and couldn't climb them, and I could, so I picked her pears, and she paid me for it, and I made a few dollars. Then I got a job washing the windows at the new library, which had just been built.
It's a building we're in right now.
No, I'm talking about the city library.
Oh, the city library, yeah.
And then I got a job washing dishes at the co-op and got my meals for that. And I worked at the city power plant, and I got a good job in the soils lab, grinding soil samples. And I don't know, I had other jobs. I worked at the Daily Collegian as a reporter for the School of Agriculture, and they were supposed to pay me, and they never did.
Well, we'll see if we can make that up to you.
I've got a claim I want to show you when we get through talking.
Good. So you didn't particularly like college. Why'd you stick with it?
Well, I wanted to get a degree.
How come?
I wanted to get a good job.
So you didn't envision going back in farming?
I don't know that I did or not. That decision came after the war.
Mm. Well, let's talk about that. So you got out in 41, 42.
January 42. I finished my classwork in 7 semesters, and I finished up in January of 42.
So by now we were...
The war started on the 7th of
December
of 41.
Right.
So
where were you that day?
Well, I was staying at a boarding house down on Knobloch and Digman's boarding house. I had a job there making beds for the rest of the residents.
They didn't make their own beds?
No, I was the bed maker and the janitor.
Never heard of that.
Anyhow, it was a Sunday, and we were lounging around and listening to the radio and heard about the bombing of Pearl Harbor. So I immediately went up to the Ocala office, and we had a AP wire, and we turned it on and listened to the reports come in over the AP wire. So I was here on the campus when Pearl Harbor happened.
Were you surprised, shocked? I mean,
I was stunned.
Really? There was no expectation that the Japanese would attack?
None that I know of. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been the sitting duck.
Yeah. So I guess the draft was underway by then?
Yes, the draft was in operation.
And would the draft go, they would draft you into the Army?
Yes.
Okay. But you ended up in the Marines.
I volunteered for the Marines.
Why'd you do that? I mean,
Well,
why the Marines instead of
there were some of my friends had already gone to the Marines, Don Dickey and Wayne Miller or two I think of. And I thought maybe I'd get in the same outfits with some of those people I knew. And really, I think I'm accurate in saying this, there's a certain feeling if you wanted to be where the action was, be in the Marines. Mm-hmm. And,
they were going to be the first ones in, and
well, I don't know if we knew about that, but they were.
So where'd you enlist in the Marines?
Oklahoma City.
And
I hauled a load of hogs down for my dad and went by the recruiting office and signed up and had to go get a picture. So I went to we put a quarter in the machine and you get your picture. I've still got that picture somewhere.
Did you sell the hogs?
Yeah.
So that's a good day's work.
Yeah, it was 100 miles down there and 100 miles back.
Yeah.
And they joined the Marines, yeah.
Didn't have I-35 either.
No, it was old Highway 77.
Yeah. So what happened then? Did you go to get dispatched to Quantico or somewhere?
I'd had my degree, I'd finished the college classwork. So they put me in officers candidates class, and there wasn't a space for me at Quantico until November. So I had from April or May until November to stay at the farm and help my dad.
And then went and did your basic training? And
then they sent me in their train ticket. I'd never ridden a train before, so that's long, complicated ticket almost threw me, but I got to Quantico on time. First thing I saw was a bayonet practice. I walked from the train to the barracks. People out there trying to kill each other with bayonets. It was kind of a rude.
Thought maybe you'd come to the wrong place.
Yeah, I thought about getting on the train and going back.
Well, I of course, in your book, you chronicle your experience in the military and in the Pacific.
Yeah.
And I know you've done some interviews on that subject, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But I was struck by the contrast of growing up on a farm in northern Oklahoma and all of a sudden being thrown into the greatest and the most horrible war of all time in the Pacific Theater, which is a long way from Billings, Oklahoma.
Yeah, well, I went to Quantico for 5 months, and then was sent to Camp Elliott by San Diego and given tank training, which took 3 or 4 months. And then I was put in the 4th Division. I was being formed up to make the landing on the Marshall Islands. We were stationed at Camp Pendleton.
I've heard you say that you populated your unit with farm boys because they could fix anything. And I think you said all a tractor all a tank is a tractor with guns.
An armor plate.
Yeah.
That's right. We tried to do that. And I think it worked. We had a good outfit.
Yeah. What do you, and I know you were on Iwo Jima. Were you in the first wave at Iwo Jima?
Probably not. I would imagine we were in the 3rd or 4th wave. The first wave are the infantry, and they're supposed to secure the beaches so we can get the tanks in and other hardware, other Amtraks and amphibians. So we probably landed about 20 minutes after the first wave.
Well, was the fighting fierce?
It was pandemonium. There'd been a storm night before, and the waves had made a terrace. So it's like build a wall around the edge of the water. We couldn't find a place to get up over the terrace to get our tanks on the beach. We finally got where somebody had knocked the terrace down, and we went through there. And my tank got about 300 or 400 yards up the side of the mountain, if you want to call it a mountain, and hit a mine and broke the track. And what the Japanese did was to bury a 250-pound bomb and then put what's called a yardstick mine on top of it. And when the tank went over the yardstick mine, it would blow the track off and set the big bomb off and blow the tank apart, kill everybody in it. But that yardstick mine didn't do it. It broke our track, but it didn't set off the bomb. So we didn't know that, of course, what had happened, but we sat there that afternoon for 3 or 4 hours, and right ahead of us was where the Japs had put a bunch of junked airplanes, and they'd hidden machine guns in there. And our infantry came up from the beach. They were getting fire from this pile of junked airplanes. So when we'd see a machine gun open up, we'd knock it out with our cannon. So we had quite a little activity there for 3 or 4 hours. And when we'd knock out one of their machine guns over on the right flank was where they'd stationed their coastal defense guns. And when we'd open up on their machine guns, the coastal defense guns would open up on us, but they didn't have sense enough to shoot armor-piercing ammunition. They were shooting high explosive. And they'd point detonate, and they'd make your head ring, but it didn't do any damage.
When you were going onto the beach, was there just a hail of gun and artillery fire?
Well, if you're in a tank, which we were, and you're buttoned down, which we did, you're pretty much oblivious to what's going on outside of where you are. You can see what you can catch through the periscope. But the thing I remember was how the infantry left our area alone. They didn't come through there because there was so much of this fire coming from down at coastal defense guns and machine guns. It was not a good place to be.
What do you take away from that experience? I know it went on for a long time after that, but are you better off because you went through that experience?
The experience of the war.
Yeah. I guess you grow up pretty fast, don't you?
Yes, in many ways. I'd be hard put in words what you take away from an experience where you're worried every day about being killed or trying hard to kill everybody around you. I remember not having any qualms about seeing people killed. I had 2 of my tanks blew up, hit mines, and that went off and killed 10 of my good friends in a matter of a few minutes. And I don't remember. I thought I was next or anything like that. It didn't worry me. It didn't cross my mind to be afraid. You just went ahead and tried to do what you could. I think some of the things I learned as a result of the war were different, apart from the fighting. And that is that we had a base camp on Maui, which had a segregated society. The whites controlled the land and the economy, and the Japanese and the other Orientals were field workers. And it seemed to me to be a waste of human resources to not give those other than the Orientals a chance to participate in the full economy. And of course, after the war was over, they did open it up, and you get people like Dan Minogue came out of that.
Yeah. Well, you came home and ran for the legislature
Yes,
as a Republican.
yes. My dad saw to that.
Tell us about that.
Well, my dad was a hard-shell Kansas Republican. And when I got to be 21 years old, he went down to the county seat and registered me as Republican and sent me the registration papers, and that was it.
So it wasn't a philosophical
No.
decision on your part,
No.
because the state was dramatically Democratic.
Yes.
There were, I think 38. I was looking 38 to 6. 38 to 6 in the Senate. The Democrats had, and then the House it was 95 to 25.
Yeah, it was not a smart political decision.
Well, but that was a pretty Republican area, wasn't it? I mean, was your predecessor Republican?
Yes. My predecessor was Bob McCubbins, who had been a Republican legislator, and he resigned to become district attorney and left a vacancy, and so he asked me to file for it, and I did.
So that's how you made the decision to run.
Right.
What did the legislator make in those days?
$6 a day when you met.
When you actually met. So, and you served the first 2 years. What was that like? I mean, here you are back from war, and now all of a sudden you're...
Well, a lot of others are back from the war. That was no big deal. Although we made an issue of it when I ran. I was a veteran. But
you were a decorated veteran, right?
Well, lots of them were.
Well, but I mean, didn't you win the Silver Star?
Yeah.
What was that for?
It was for dragging an injured Marine out of a burning tank.
Who was it?
Dick Hargis. By the way, same name. He was from Oshkosh, Nebraska.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, my brother, he worked for you many years, Dick
Named
Hargis.
Dick, yeah.
Yeah.
I never thought of that before, but he died here a couple of years ago. He became the postmaster at Oshkosh.
But you saved him.
Well, he had his leg shot off by an anti-tank missile, and the three of us, the gunner who was sitting between my legs, got hit in the chest, and he was dead. But when we got out, we found out there was just three of us. We climbed back up on to look to see what had happened to the others, and Hargis was still alive. And so we drug him out and got him to a first aid station, and he survived.
And you've stayed in touch with him all those years?
Yes, I talked to him just short before he died.
So anyway, back to running for the legislature. So you ran, and who'd you run against?
Taylor. No, that's not right. I'm sorry, I can't remember. He was a retired major from the Army.
And you, what were the issues of the day, the big issues that you dealt with in Oklahoma City at the Capitol?
Well, there was no huge issue that sticks in my mind. The state was not flush with money, but it was adequately funded, and we didn't have any big tax issues. I remember trying to get the sales tax exemption for feed, seed, and fertilizer, and couldn't get it done. But when I got to be governor, I got it done. And education was one of the big things was reapportionment.
Reapportionment.
Yeah.
It was apportioned pretty democratically, wasn't it?
It was apportioned one legislator to the county, with 7 for Oklahoma County and Tulsa.
I see.
And I think Muskogee and maybe Garfield County had 2, but every county had at least one representative.
You ran for re-election.
And lost.
Who beat you?
His name was, I think it was Dr. Taylor. No, it was Dr. Sides. He was a dentist.
Was he a Republican?
He was a Democrat.
Really? So
Yeah.
a Democrat beat you. How did he beat you?
Well, he had made friends by pulling people's teeth, I guess. He had a lot of contacts. He was a well-known.
Had you done something to make somebody mad, or?
What I did was I'd gotten married and we had a child, and I was in the bulldozing business, and so I thought I'd done a good job as a legislator and I didn't need to campaign. And I spent my time looking after my own affairs, which is a mistake.
So you
I learned if I'm going to run for an office, you better let the people know you want it.
You want it.
Yeah.
Ask for their vote. Well, you mentioned getting married. Talk about meeting Shirley.
Well, Shirley grew up on a farm 6 miles from where I grew up. And
Did you know her all your life?
Didn't know her at all. Our parents were on friendly terms. They didn't socialize together. And her granddad was someone I'd known for a long time. It was Bert Osborne. He was a fine old gentleman. He was hard of hearing. When you talked to him, you had to shout at him. But Bert had a pasture right across the fence from ours, and we had times our cattle got mixed up, and we had some dealings together. But I hadn't known Shirley. She was 6 years younger than I was. So when I went off to the war, she was still in grade school. And when I came back from the war, I was busy with getting the business started and getting the farming going. I first remember seeing her in church. And then shortly after that, I had a flat on my old car, and she gave me a lift down to get the car tire repaired, and we made a date and went to the movies, and things went on from there.
You didn't do that flat on purpose to meet her.
I wasn't that original. No.
And then did you go? So then talk about your daughters.
Well, the girls were born at Billings. I mean, at Enid, we lived at Billings. Pat was the oldest, and she was born during a fierce blizzard. It was on March 9th, so it was a late blizzard. Shirley had a doctor's appointment that morning, and we started to the hospital to see the doctor, and got stuck in the snowdrift. And her folks had a new car, and they came and got us to the hospital in time. But then she started having birth pains, and the baby was born next morning or during the night. And her dad and I went back. We both had sheep that were having lambs, and we needed to be back to help the ones that got in trouble. And so we had to walk through the blizzard for about 3 miles. The car got stuck in a blizzard again, that snowbank again. But we walked to his house, and I spent the night there, and the next day we found out I had a baby. Gail was born during a windy time. It was kind of, I don't want to think we chose a name because it was a high wind, but it kind of.
Talking about Gail.
Yeah. And Ann, I don't remember anything dramatic about her being born. But the girls all grew up on the farm and were almost teenagers, not quite teenagers, when we went into the governor's mansion. And I don't think they ever had any bad impact from being somewhat famous for kids.
Yeah. When so you got beat, and there was a long period of interim before you got back into politics, wasn't it?
Yes, I was defeated in 48. I ran for state chairman in 60, so it was 12 years.
And were you farming? Just spent your time farming?
And we had a bulldozing company. Had bulldozers, built terraces and ponds and waterways. What I learned among other things, when I was in the legislature, is that you can't make a living in politics at $6 a day. And so I decided not to try anything more in the way of getting elected to office until I had my finances in better shape. And so I spent those 10 years trying to accumulate some cows and machinery and land.
Well, what caused you to get involved in the Republican Party apparatus as, I think, Noble County Republican chairman and then later state chairman?
I was elected Noble County Republican chairman. I don't know why I was elected, particularly, I guess because nobody really wanted the job. But I worked at it, and I made the attention of John Tyler, who was the state chairman. And John decided he wanted to become the national committee man for Oklahoma. So he resigned as state chairman and promoted me for the job and helped me get elected to state chairman.
What year was that?
1960.
We'll get some water here.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in 1960 you became state chairman, and Oklahoma would hardly be considered a two-party state at that time. I mean, the Democrats still dominated the legislature and
They dominated, but they didn't win presidential elections. We voted for Eisenhower twice. And I felt like there was a chance that the people would vote Republican for other offices if they had a good candidate, a good campaign.
So what'd you do as chairman? What was your agenda and activity?
The agenda was a GOP countdown, and the objective was to capture the governorship in 62. Mm-hmm. And we set forth a 10-point program with dates and objectives for the amount of funds we'd raise and how much we'd need and what we'd do with it. We had a budget, and I can't remember all the 10 points, but one was a re-registration drive to try to get the Democrats who voted Republican to register Republican, and candidate recruitment and candidate training, and we had the whole 9 yards, and we followed through with it very well, including a fundraiser in every county. At that time, the Republican Party was financed by a small group of very fine and wealthy and generous Tulsans, mostly oil fellas. And they had what was called the State Finance Office, which they operated out of Tulsa, and they kept control of the money. And by doing that, they controlled the party. And I had to tear that up.
Take control of the money?
And fire the head of the finance office.
Now that doesn't sound like a real good plan if you want to run for office yourself in that party.
I wasn't thinking of running for office, but I just knew you couldn't run an organization if the money's being controlled by people who don't have any feel for what.
Did you try to attract a candidate for governor? Did you talk to people to run, get them to run?
I talked to several. One of which was Jink Jones, and Jink.
The Tulsa Tribune.
Tulsa Tribune.
Yeah.
Very eloquent and articulate, well-known man, and I thought he'd make a great candidate. But he wasn't interested. He'd rather be on the outside taking pot shots and being inside trying to fix the problems. I remember Jink Jones.
It's Jink and Lloyd Jones, right?
Well, now Jink and Lloyd was the old man.
Okay.
This is Jink. Yeah. This is Jink Jones. And then there's Jink Jones II, Jr.
Got it.
Yeah. But I'm having a hard time thinking of others. I didn't talk to Bud Wilkinson at that time. I talked to him about running for the Senate. The answer to your question is that we didn't have any candidate.
And you'd done all this build-up with your 10-point plan.
Yeah.
And now it's time for the governor's race, and you don't have a candidate.
That's right.
So what'd you do?
I ran. And I didn't want to do it. I felt it would probably bankrupt me, and I'd lose what little head start I'd gotten in farming.
Did you have any illusion at all that you could win?
No.
What'd Shirley think about it?
She very, very reluctantly, I guess I could say, did. And I think she never drug her feet. She did her part very well. She and the girls and I spent the summer in the station wagon campaigning on the main streets all across the state. And she hung in there every bit of the way. It was a...
Did you do any TV? Television advertising?
TV didn't pay attention to me, and I didn't have any money to pay attention to them, so we kept our separate ways.
Who were you running against? Did you have an opponent in the primary?
Not a significant opponent. He was some perpetual candidate type guy. Yeah. But the Democrats had a mean contest between Raymond Gary and Bill Atkinson.
Raymond Gary, who was from Medill
Yes.
area, and
former governor.
Right, and Bill Atkinson was from Midwest City.
Yes, he created Midwest City. He was the founder of Midwest City.
Had the newspaper there too.
Later on.
Okay.
He did that after he was defeated because he felt that Oklahoma hadn't treated him right. So he was going to get even with them by putting them out of business.
Did the Oklahomans support you?
Yes.
Did you go down and see Mr. Gaylord?
Many times. And this is EK.
Yeah, right. And so you ran that race. What'd you spend on that race?
$225,000.
And were you able to raise it all, or did you have to spend some of your money?
We raised it all and had a little bit left over. I didn't have any money to spend.
At what point did you begin to think you might actually win this thing?
Well, on the weekend before the election, which had been on Thursday, Bill bought a whole series of ads accusing me of having a secret plan to raise taxes. The issue then was, my issue was no new tax. I can tell you a story about Bill. Maybe I should.
Yeah, go ahead.
Bill and Raymond were scheduled to have a debate in Tulsa before the runoff. They were in a runoff. And the Tulsa World...
Well, Raymond Gary had already been governor, right?
He'd been governor.
Yeah, but you couldn't succeed yourself then.
That's right.
Yeah.
One term.
Right.
So the Tulsa World held this debate, and Phil Dessar was their main political reporter. And they invited me to be there. And so these two Democrats, one on one side and one on the other, and me in the middle. And we're on television. And Phil Dessar asked, they were supporting Bill Atkinson. But Phil asked this question to Bill. He said, now, Bill, you're running your campaign on the issue that the state doesn't have enough money to provide the necessary services, and you propose to get the money we need by raising the sales tax by 50%. And I said, the present governor has proposed the same kind of a program to the legislature, and they've turned him down. Now, my question to you is, how will you run state government if the legislature won't go along with your program? And Bill sat there for a moment thinking real seriously, and he said, well, if the legislature won't raise the taxes the way I want them to, then we'll get rid of the waste, graft, and corruption and run the state on the money we've got.
Oh, my goodness.
My goodness. I told that story 100 times. He was saying that we got to raise taxes to pay for the state's waste, graft, and corruption.
Graft and corruption. That's right. Did you didn't use that, did you?
Every time I was with him, and Bill wasn't particularly nibbling on his feet anyway, and it just totally frustrated him. He couldn't deny it, said it, and anyway, I felt like that's when the election turned.
So you're elected, 1962, 3 daughters, Shirley, and I guess John Kennedy's president.
That's 64.
Yeah, and so talk about that. Talk about moving that family into the governor's mansion. And
well, I give Shirley and the girls great credit. They made the shift with, as far as I could tell, with no hiccups at all. The girls, we had college students from OU, medical students and law students, as guards for the mansion, security people. And the girls had the great times with those young men.
Oh, yeah, I imagine they're sliding down the banister and just having a great time.
Yeah, climbing on top of the Capitol and sitting on the lions that are up there.
Right.
They had the run of the place, I think. You can talk to them if you want to, but it was a great pleasure for me to see how well they got along. We tried to have dinner together every night and have weekends.
Right. You would, the lieutenant governor then was who?
Leo
Leo Winters.
Yeah. Leo was a good guy to have as a running or a partner. He did his thing and left me alone.
Yeah. Well, that really was a momentous time, really. I mean, one of the main things, of course, they cite when you were governor is the really beginning of our vocational technical.
Yes, we passed the state constitutional amendment to set up the vocational technical system.
But was that your idea? Were you the?
I think the idea was from Dewey Bartlett. Best I remember, he was impressed with what South Carolina had done.
He's in the state senate at the time.
Yes.
And ended up following you as governor. Anything else from that period that you recall?
Well, there are a lot of things that are not significant. Maybe is that we exempted feed, seed, and fertilizer from the sales tax.
You got that done.
And we set up a state employee retirement system, which has been a good thing. Right. And we went 4 years with no tax increase.
Did you find a lot of graft and corruption?
I can think of a few things. The answer is we weren't equipped to do investigations. The governor's office doesn't have that capability. But we found several things where, well, just to give you an example, the state buys a lot of insurance on this building, and those policies have been handled on a buddy basis. And when a policy came up, the governor would say, give that one to Jones Company, and another company would give it, which is obvious opportunities for hanky-panky. Mm-hmm. So we started a policy of bidding on insurance, put them up for competitive bids. And the insurance people screamed and they said, you won't get any bids, because there's set rates that they have to charge. Well, we got bids on every time we asked for them, and we saved the state a ton of money in premiums on insurance policies. There's another place where there's a state institution that was about 3 miles from a major gas transmission line. And one of the local citizens had made a deal to lay a 3-mile, 2-inch pipeline over to this major pipeline and furnish gas to heat and cool this institution. He was charging like 5 times the going rate, but he had a monopoly on the pipeline, so we had to stop that.
So you were you finished your first term as governor in 1966.
Yeah.
And what were the plans then? Just to go back to the farm?
No, I'd gotten real fed up with Mike Monroney.
Who was the senator? He and Bob Kerr. Well, Bob Kerr had died, hadn't he? And
he died in January.
Right. And I guess
he died in January before I became governor.
Right. And then why were you fed up with Mike Monroney?
Well, he'd forgotten where he came from. He became a Mr. Aviation, and he spent his time working on legislation, dealing with aviation rather than what was important to our state. Of course, aviation wasn't. We got given credit for giving getting the FAA center located in Oklahoma City. That was a good accomplishment for him. Mm-hmm. So he was effective in his way, but he was aloof and really didn't act like he had time for Oklahoma's problems.
Did so had you decided then to run against him in 1968?
There was a petty thing happened that made me decide to do it, and it's not. I don't think it's a thing you wanted to hear.
Oh yeah, sure. That's just for posterity.
Well, this shows you how things sometimes happen. The year I ran for governor, we built our house on the farm, and I borrowed the money from Albright Title and Trust. No, that's not right. I borrowed the money from the Farmers Home Administration to build the house, and we were totally eligible to get the loan and use the money as we did. But then the rules provided that if your condition changed and you became eligible for regular loans, that you should pay off your farmer's home loan and get a loan through a regular insurance company or real estate firm. Well, right after I was elected, that was the last thing I was thinking about. Monroney was in the process of investigating this loan deal. And luckily for me, the farmer's home manager was friendly toward me, and he called me up and told me, he said, I don't know what's going on here, but somebody's digging around and you're looking at your loan. And he said that I probably should move it if I could. So I called the Albright Title and Trust in Newkirk and made a deal to refinance the house. It was about $10,000 or $12,000 deal. And we're in the process of refinancing it, which took a few days to examine title and other things you have to do. And Monroney made a big announcement that he'd found this terrible thing I'd done. And
you think he anticipated you were going to run against him? Is that what he was trying to do?
I think he did. He was trying to do me in. But it made me think he was so petty that he didn't deserve to be in the Senate.
But now, but right along in there somehow you got associated with Richard Nixon, and actually were named as national campaign manager.
That was after my term was over.
Right.
At the end of the first term.
Right. How'd that happen? How'd you get it on the national stage there?
Well, what happened was that I was Republican state chairman when he ran for president the first time. And we'd had a fairly active time of organizing the party. We hadn't started the GOP countdown yet. I had secured a chairman for every county in the state. Up until that time, we had many counties that didn't have a Republican chairman. So I'd worked at it, and anyway, when the campaign time came, we mounted a pretty effective Nixon effort, raised some money, and we're putting on a good campaign. But Nixon, he came, we had a Republican National Committee meeting met in Oklahoma City, and Nixon made a talk there, and I got acquainted with him. And then when the campaign time came, he sent a guy named Peter Flanagan down here to organize what was called the Democrats for Nixon. And I told Pete Flanagan to get out of town, that we didn't need him, that we'd organized the party and we're going to build up for the future, and we didn't want him coming here and taking off all the excitement and all the campaign support for a one-time thing when we wanted to be here for permanently. And Pete got kind of irate about it, and after several weeks of haggling, he finally came down there and set up his own organization anyway. And we used it as a dumping ground for some of the oddballs that always show up around the campaign headquarters. We'd send them over to the Democrats for Nixon. And we carried the state. I think we were next to Nebraska, getting the best percentage vote. And he was friendly. I mean, thankful for that. And Flanagan called up and apologized, and we got to be good friends later on. And he changed over to Republican. He was in the White House.
But then Nixon asked you to be his campaign chairman.
Well, that came about because Flanagan asked. They started a thing called the Committee to Re-elect Nixon after Nixon lost twice, or lost once and lost the governorship of California.
Right. You won't have Richard Nixon
kick around anymore. And so they set up this thing they called a Committee to Re-elect Nixon. And Flanagan was in it, and I can't remember, the Attorney General from Arizona that got in trouble. Anyway, there was 8 or 10 of these guys that met. And they had one of them was the guy named Parkinson, who was a doctor from San Diego. And Parkinson was named as the chairman of this Committee to Re-elect Nixon. And he put together a book of things that had to be done, step by step to get Nixon to the White House. But unfortunately, he never got around to doing anything. He just sat around and talked and made plans and didn't do any work. So Nixon was about to have to fire him, but Nixon had a reputation of not being able to get along with staff, and so he hated to do it. And Parkinson, right about this time, found out that his wife had cancer, and so he resigned and went back to California. And they were looking around somebody to take his place, and they decided I was kind of in the middle of the political spectrum. I wasn't a hardline right-winger or liberal, and that I could talk. What they wanted me to do was line up as many prominent backers as they could, because Nixon was kind of out there all by himself.
So did you travel the country?
I traveled the country.
At the time, you had already decided to run against Mulroney, haven't you?
I'd started running against Mulroney.
So you knew you couldn't stick with this through the '68 election.
I took the job on the understanding that they'd get somebody that would be the campaign manager for the whole time, but they couldn't find anybody. They never did find anybody. This guy I'm trying to think of, he was Attorney General under Nixon. He kind of served as campaign manager, and the guy who did run the campaign was a congressman from Kansas. But he thought I was being too liberal to be the front man. So
Nixon, of course, as we know, got elected, and beat Hubert Humphrey.
Yeah.
And you beat Mike Mulroney. How on earth were you able to beat Mike Mulroney was an institution. He had been in the Senate for 30 years.
30 years. No, 30 years in Congress, 12 in the House and 18 in the Senate. I don't know the answer. I don't know why anybody votes for me in the first place. I'm not eloquent. I can hardly get 2 words to stick together. And I didn't have any money, and I didn't have any fame. I don't know, I think when people look for someone to vote for, they look to see somebody they could approach if they need help, somebody they could trust with me.
Well, but my experience with you is you study the issues, you think about them carefully, and then when you make a decision, you usually stick with it. I know I've tried to talk you out of it before.
Yeah, the rule is get your facts and then make your decision and stay with it.
What were the big issues then in '68? I guess you had that tumultuous Democratic convention. We had a lot of Vietnam and civil rights turmoil going on at that time.
Yeah, we had all those things. The issue we used on Mike was that he'd forgotten where he came from. He was not representing Oklahoma.
Well, so you went into the U.S. Senate in 1968, and obviously had a close relationship with the president as a result of having been his campaign manager.
I did, and I didn't. Nixon. Well, the one thing I can talk about that shows what our relationship was is he Bryce Harlow, who was his chief of staff, invited me down to have breakfast with him one morning at the University Club in downtown Washington. And I had no idea what was up, but Bryce told me that the Secretary of Agriculture was going to resign or had resigned. And they were looking for someone to take his place, and they'd come down to two names, me and this fellow from Indiana. And he wondered if I'd consider it if Nixon had offered it to me. And I'd just been reelected to the Senate and didn't feel like I could walk away. And I talked to Abe Ribicoff, who'd been governor, and then he'd been senator, and then he'd been governor, and then he'd been secretary of HEW before he came to the Senate. And Abe said that switching from governor and senator to being a cabinet officer was a bad proposition, because when you're a governor or senator, you make your own decisions. But if you're in the cabinet, you got to be a team player. And he advised me not to do it, and so I didn't.
And that was after you'd run again against. Well, I'm fast forwarding through your first Senate term, and I need to back up and talk about a couple of major issues that happened along the way. And I guess the first I'd want to talk about is the Panama Canal Treaty. Now, that probably was the most controversial issue of your entire political career, wasn't it?
Probably so. And for a kind of a curious reason. There's a kind of a game that's played in Washington where special interest groups find a sensational issue or a sensitive issue or a emotional issue and use it to raise a lot of money, and they live on it for 3 or 4 years until they bring up a new one. And they chose Panama Canal as the cause célèbre to use for these right-wing groups like the John Birch Society to get their membership and get them geared up, and it's a fat way to make a living.
Interesting.
And so they were pushing the Panama Canal. It got to be a issue for a lot of people too, but one who was caught up in it is Ed Gaylord.
Yeah, your friend.
Well, that's another subject we could talk about.
All right.
But Ed was insistent that I come down and talk to him about Panama Canal, so we met for breakfast at the Skirvin Hotel. I remember I picked a mess of asparagus to take back to Washington, so I had it in my suitcase, and I just gave it to Ed as a peace token, and we talked about it, and then he gave me a bundle of literature for me to read about the Panama Canal, and it was all from the John Birch Society. And it just made me realize that this was not a group that I wanted to be making national policy. And
so the proposal was that the Panama Canal would be turned back to the country of Panama over a period of time,
20
right?
years.
20 years.
For 10 years, there was a commission made up of 5 Americans and 4 Panamanians, and then the membership shifted to 4 and 5.
Well, in the face of this outcry from the right wing of the Republican Party and others that we own that canal and it was sovereign soil of the United States and that we should have given it away was almost treason. In the face of all that, how'd you make the decision to support it?
Well, basically 2 things. One was, and it just happened, Dewey Bartlett gave me a book called Path Between the Seas, written by David McCullough, that talked about what led up to the United States building the canal and probably we had problems we had building it. It ended in 1914, so it had nothing to do with the treaties. But it made me understand that the canal was not built on sovereign soil. It had been owned by Colombia and Panama, and we'd been involved in it as leaseors. Anyway, the other thing was that the general in charge, after the Panama Canal was built, it had been operated by the Corps of Engineers for all these 75 years. And the current person in charge of it is a general named Parfit. And he came to Washington to have some interviews, and he came to, and I asked him to come to my office, and he did. We talked about the canal and what would likely happen if we turned the treaties down. And then I asked him if he thought that Torrijos, who was head of the government of Panama, would start a war if we turned down the treaties. And Parfit said there's no question he would. He'd set up his whole campaign and his administration based on getting the canal free. And I said, well, the obvious next question is, if they start a war down there around the canal, can you keep the canal open, and can you handle insurgencies? And he said, well, that's a question he said I can't answer for. He said, I can tell you that militarily we can handle them, but we can't do it if the politicians keep taking shots at us and withhold money or support we need. He said, you're the politician, I'm not, so he said, you have to answer your own question. And I felt like if we got in there and got a lot of people killed or hurt and got the canal blocked by people, somebody sinking some ships in those narrow places, it would be nothing but another Vietnam type mess. And so I decided we'd better face the music and go along to approve the treaties.
Well, I know you had said that our warships couldn't use the canal.
No, the carriers and the big tankers and battleships can't get through there. It's too narrow.
Yeah. Jimmy Carter was president.
Yes.
Did that affect your decision at all?
Not really. Again, there's a lot of behind this. Jimmy Carter had a guy named Harris. Hargis, who was his liaison part of his liaison with the Senate, and Hargis was one who contacted me, and Hargis set it up for me to come down and see Carter. Carter explained his situation, and I told him that it's a very delicate issue back here at home, and I didn't want to appear to be influenced by the president or anybody else. I'd make the decision based on the facts. It's best I could determine what they were. And Harris left me alone. I never went to see Jimmy Carter, and never talked to him about it on the phone or anything else. But when I made the decision to vote for the canal, for the treaties, I told Hargis that it was going to cost me here at home because it was a very bad political mistake in the eyes of most people. And I said, we've got some water projects. If you could see fit to approve them, it would sure make things easier. And we didn't have any understanding or anything. He never agreed to it. But when the Carter budget came out that year, they put Arcadia and Atoka both in the
Lake Arcadia and Lake Atoka.
Yeah.
But Gaylord called you the senator from Panama.
They called me a traitor.
Yeah.
That hurt.
Yeah. Well, certainly for a decorated Marine on Iwo Jima to be called a traitor.
Particularly for a guy who spent time on the golf courses at Panama during the war.
I remember you called him the senator from Hee Haw.
Yes.
Referring to his ownership of that television show.
Let me tell you I don't know what we're wasting time here, but two stories about Ed Gaylord and my relationship. One of these is in the book, and maybe I shouldn't tell it again, but Shirley and I went there. We were trying to get Bill Benoski to run for the Senate, and Ed Gaylord had a meeting at his house with some of the potential supporters for Benoski's candidacy.
He was president of OU at the time.
And we had a nice dinner, and for some reason, Shirley and I were the last two guests to leave. And before we went out the front door, Ed got me by the arm and said, "Come back here, I want to show you something." He took me back to his bedroom and into the bathroom. And there was a closet like that. It's higher than that with solid doors. And he opened the door up, and inside this door was 2 photographs, Dewey Bartlett and Henry Bellmon. And Ed said, I just wanted you to know these are my 2 favorite politicians. And he closed the door, and we left. The other thing that happened was Ed came down with pancreatic cancer and was in bad shape. And he had this is after Thelma had died, of course. But he was keeping company with a woman named Jo, you know her.
Oh, yeah, Josie Freedy.
Joe Freedy. Well, we were his son-in-law,
Clay Bennett.
Clay Bennett. Clay and Louise invited Eloise and I to come to their house for dinner one night. And Clay had cooked out. He's a great chef. He had a fabulous dinner. And the guests were Clay and his wife and their couple of young girls, and Josie Freedy, and Eloise and me. And that was the last dinner he did before he died.
Mm. Well, he was certainly
he was trying to tell me something, I think.
Yeah, could be. I skipped over a very momentous electoral experience you had when you ran for re-election against Ed Edmondson, the longtime congressman from Muskogee. And I was involved in that campaign.
Yes, you were.
And he
involved in all the campaigns.
You won by 3,000 some odd votes, which is pretty narrow victory, coming after everything that had gone on. And Ed Edmondson complained that there were voting machines in Tulsa that the straight party lever didn't work on them. And so...
no, what happened was that there was an American Party candidate, a guy named Real Little from Medill.
Medill, yeah.
And the machines they had in Tulsa were only rigged for 2 candidates. And the law requires that you have to be able to vote a straight party ticket. And they when they tried to comply with that law, they had to set it up so you had to push 5 levers to get to vote for the Senate. And Ed Edmondson made his case of the fact that, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, that the Republican voters were more intelligent than Democrat voters, and they could figure this out, and the Democrats couldn't. That's the gist of what he tried to.
Right. So that case was tried before Judge Knox Byram, who was from Shawnee, tried in Tulsa, and you won it.
Yeah.
There.
Byram was a Democrat.
He was a very prominent Democratic judge. Then went to the Oklahoma Supreme Court, and you won it.
And the judges I'd appointed, what's the word you use? Secluded. Recused themselves.
And then
we're all Democrats.
And then I learned at the time, I'm embarrassed to say as a lawyer, I didn't understand that the United States Senate can seat anybody they want.
They're the judge of their own members.
Yeah. So even though you won, and it had been validated in the district and in the Supreme Court, they could actually refuse to seat you.
They certainly could.
And that was the proposal that was made, I guess. And
that was Ed Edmondson's plan.
Yeah. So
he was betting on the partisanship to be so strong that they'd vote for him and not me.
And so, in fact, was it Howard Cannon's committee?
Yes.
From Nevada?
Rules Committee.
Rules Committee decided to take it to the floor.
No, there's a little more to it. They had 2 contests, one from New Hampshire, where the governor was one party and the legislature was another. And the governor issued a certificate of election to one candidate, and the legislature gave a certificate to the other one. So they had both candidates had certificates that they'd won, and they had to decide which one the Cannon's group had to decide which one to seat. And it got to be very bitter. And they put ours on the back burner until this was all over with, and it took 16 months.
When they finally did vote,
Oh, but they seated me, but they seated me provisionally. I wasn't a full member. When finally it drug on so long that we decided to try to force it to come to a head and get done with it. And I can't remember exactly how we positioned ourselves, but if we'd lost, I would not have been out of the Senate. We'd still had to go back through the
election
state.
again.
Yeah. Anyway, the Democrats outnumbered Republicans in the Senate by about 9 or 10 votes. We had to have 9 Democrat votes to win, and we got 9. And I counted on Ed Muskie helping me, but he didn't.
He was on the budget committee with you.
Yeah, he was chairman. I was ranking member, so we were on good terms. But I suppose he'd vote for me, but he left town, and Hubert Humphrey voted against me. We were on good terms, and Hubert said, "Well, I had to cast one vote for the party." He said he'd been with me, but that was Hubert. He couldn't depend on him. But the one that surprised me was Lloyd Benson from Texas. Mm-hmm. Lloyd was fairly new in the Senate, and I hadn't had any dealings with him whatsoever. Barely knew him. But he voted to seat me, and that was the 9th vote I needed. And later on, after I got to know Lloyd better, I felt comfortable. I asked him why he voted for me as he did. And he said, "I'll tell you what happened." He said, I was running for president, and he was. He was a Democrat candidate trying to get to be nominated. And he said I was in Tulsa to call on Ed Edmondson to get him to help me, and he refused. He said that night I was in my hotel room getting ready to go to bed and had the news on, and they were interviewing Bellmon on television. And the reporter, after asking some other questions, asked me which Democrat I thought ought to be the Democratic nominee, and I said Lloyd Benson. He said, "I paid you back."
That's great. Another momentous decision you made as a United States Senator was to vote to allow busing
Integration.
School children.
Yeah.
Yeah. That also was a very controversial vote.
And it still is, and rightly so. I don't know what the answer is.
What made you even consider supporting it? Because obviously there was tremendous controversy about the subject.
Well, let me say 2 or 3 things. First of all, remember back to the Maui experience where you had the color line, and the Orientals were on one side and the whites were on the other, and the Orientals were kept from being doctors or lawyers or professional people because they couldn't get education. They're supposed to be field workers and be content with that. And that seemed to me like that was the same thing we had in this educational thing. We had this segregated school system, and the black schools were not good schools. And
you'd actually visited them when you were governor.
We'd toyed with the notion of sending our girls to Lincoln School, but when we went down there and looked at it, it was incredibly bad. The window lights were broken out. The window panes were broken out, and the trash was stored around the corners, and just kind of pandemonium. And I don't see how any kid could get an education there. So we decided we send our girls to public schools, but not the one in the community where we live. Mm-hmm. So anyway, it seemed to me that education was key to the long-term health of the country. And while nobody liked busing, if you're going to have integration in a situation where the communities are segregated in their housing, that you got to have some way of moving them around, and busing was the logical way to do it. The issue was really integration or segregation, not so much busing. Busing was a means to the end.
Mm-hmm. And looking back on the decision, what do you think? Was it a positive overall or not?
Well, let me look at it this way. If we hadn't done it, where would we be today? I don't think anybody will say that busing's been a great success. It's caused a white flight. It's behind the boom in Edmond, Yukon, Moore, and Norman. It's caused the affluent whites to leave Oklahoma City school system in many cases. And yet, if you look at Tulsa, they didn't have a forced busing system. They used what are called magnet schools, and that hadn't worked very well either. So I don't know what the answer is except time.
Well, you decided not to run for re-election to the United States Senate in 1980.
Yeah.
And stepped down and came home.
Yeah.
Are you glad you were in the Senate?
Oh yeah, I think so. I don't have any.
But my sense was you didn't like it all that much.
I didn't like it at all.
Why not?
Well, the Senate is a great place to do nothing. You can talk and propose and hide and avoid making decisions as long as you want to practically. The governor's is a place where you're kind of in charge of the agenda and you can make things come to a head pretty fast.
They even called you governor, didn't they, after you were in the Senate?
I don't remember that.
Lamar Alexander was talking about that.
Yeah. I could have been.
Yeah.
I have many good friends. In fact, Ted Stevens was my good friend.
Yeah, just finally defeated after he was convicted of
Getting his house built for nothing.
Yeah, ethics violations. So then you came home and you stayed out of politics, although you were involved in saving the Cowboy Hall of Fame.
DHS.
Came back, you were the receiver of that, and then George and I appointed you to DHS, chairman, or director, or whatever we call them. You know, that's, but then in 1986, you decided to run for governor again.
Yes, it seemed to me that the state was at kind of a crucial point.
It was a terrible time.
Yeah.
Penn Square had gone down on July 5th of 82. The banks were closed.
Yeah. Revenues had fallen off. It seemed to me like we had to have somebody who was willing to make the tough decisions, even though it cost them his chance to be reelected. I didn't want to be reelected anyway.
Yeah, by then you could succeed yourself.
Yeah.
So, so you ran for governor and ran against a young kind of upstart named David Walters.
Yeah.
Everybody thought Mike Turpin was going to get the Attorney General was going to get the nomination, but Walters slipped up on him and beat him. You really didn't have a primary opponent, as I recall.
No.
To speak of.
I don't remember having one at all.
And you were elected, and among your first acts was to make me chairman of the Department of Human Services, and I said you did that to people that didn't give you enough money.
Yeah.
But
you were great.
But lots happened during those 4 years when you were governor. Probably the most notable that will be remembered was the Education Financing Reform Bill called 1017.
Yeah.
That name is still well known in the state. Talk about that.
Well, that happened during the last year I was in office. It became plain to me that we had to provide more funding for education, and particularly beginning teacher salaries at that time were $15,000 or $16,000 a year. And the young teachers were not staying in Oklahoma; they were leaving to go to a place where they could make more nearly adequate salaries. And yet, I knew if you waited until the next session started, that the attention would be focused on the next election, and they wouldn't be willing to cast the hard votes on the school financing reform package. So I didn't talk to the legislative leaders or the staff or anybody. We just called for a special session. This was after the other session had adjourned, and with the sole purpose of dealing with education reform and funding. And we had to have a bill prepared, which we did quickly, and it wasn't adequate at all, but it was a vehicle that could
get it started.
Yeah, start the wheels turning. And we couldn't find anybody to introduce the bill. Finally, we got one legislator, somebody from Tulsa, Bill Veach. He had the courage to introduce our bill, and of course, he was the only vote he got.
I know it.
And yet, the speaker, Steve Lewis, had been working on an education reform idea, and the legislature had passed a resolution instructing the speaker and the governor and the president pro tem to appoint the Education Study Commission. And so we quickly formed it up, and we got George Singer of Tulsa to be chairman of it. And they took several months to hold hearings around over the state to find out what kind of reforms people wanted in the school system. And then we drew up a bill that included these reforms plus $250 million of new money for education. And we tried to tie the money down so that it couldn't be used for anything else. I don't think that was successful. Anyway, it became House Bill 1017, and we finally got it passed by one vote in the Senate and a few extra to spare in the House. And I think it was a well planned or well written reform package. I didn't have a whole lot to do with drawing it. But
Would you say that is that the most notable achievement of your public life?
Yes. There's one other thing that it's not necessarily notable. It's probably even hardly noticeable, but I think it was important. That is, if Ed Edmondson had succeeded in getting me thrown out of the Senate on a party line vote for no more serious issue than they had, it seemed to me like it would have kind of rocked the foundations of the electoral system. If partisanship gets to be powerful enough that it can rule the outcome of elections, it's a serious issue.
Right.
Back to your question, when you come right down to it, most of the decisions in government involve money, and the most heated decisions are how much do we tax people and how much do we spend for the various services government provides. And overriding a lot of other issues is the almighty dollar.
Speaking of the almighty dollar, the endowed chair program was passed under your leadership as governor, which has been a very important thing for where the state would actually match dollar for dollar endowed chairs at the institutions of our learning.
That was my plan. It was my program, and I'm very proud of it.
It just benefited Oklahoma State University ultimately to a little over $300 million.
Wow. Well, I hope it has had the effect of keeping some of the more talented academicians here in the state and bringing in some others from outside. Here's what lay behind that. We have, I think it's 27 state-supported institutions of higher education. And when you appropriate money to them, they cut it in 27 slices and everybody gets their piece of the sandwich. And it seemed to me that what we really need to do is strengthen our premier universities. And you never can get the legislators to do that. They won't vote extra money for OU and OSU if they they want to give every institution the same proportionate share. So we had a windfall of $125 million that came when we settled an insurance issue with the foreign insurance companies. And the Attorney General settled that, and it gave us this $125 million one-time money. We didn't want to use it for something that's going to have a repeat cost like teachers' salaries, because it wouldn't be there the next year. So we looked around and decided on this CHAIRS program. I wanted to make it 2/3 private and 1/3 public, and I wish we'd done it that way. The private money's come in a lot better than the state funds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. Well, there were a number of other things. You appointed Hannah Atkins, a wonderful lady and civil rights leader, as Secretary of State. That was probably not expected of a Republican governor.
No, Hannah was a deserving person. We had 3 Democrats on our cabinet. By the way, that was the first cabinet we'd had in the state government that really functioned. George had a kind of a figurehead cabinet. But
George and I, yeah.
Yeah. But we had a functioning cabinet and had 3 Democrats and 3 women on it.
We're sitting here on November 21st, 2008, and we've just elected a new president.
Yeah.
First black president in the history of this country. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, forgetting for a moment the black issue, it doesn't seem to me like 2 years or 4 years experience in the U.S. Senate is adequate preparation to be president. I was there for 2 years, and I know I would hate it to even think about taking over as president without any more background than that. This man has probably a better background than most who had the same experience, because he's a Harvard law graduate. I don't know how much better Harvard law is than Oklahoma law or any other. None. It has sort of an aura about it.
But what does it say, apart from that, what does it say about where the country is today, that a black man can be elected to the highest office?
I think that's a good thing. It says that if, assuming he handles the job well and survives the vicissitudes of the office.
You've always been very comfortable in your own skin. When people talk about Henry Bellmon, they talk about you. You don't worry about what people think. You worry about what's right. What would be your advice to politicians today? Because it seems to the most observers that it's a pretty cynical business, and that people are pretty well driven by polls, and form their opinions and make their decisions based on the polls.
I think that's a cowardly thing to do. We had one congressman here who always got the polls and did what his voters wanted to do. Well, the voters should, and I think do, try to hire people to hold these offices on the basis of their ability to solve problems and make wise decisions. And if the job is only trying to count the poll or count the numbers that the polls bring, and what do you need with a qualified person? You can do that with a computer automatically. So I think it's a cowardly thing, and I think it's a dangerous thing for public officials to pay any attention to polls. I suppose as a candidate you can use them to gauge your efficiency of your campaign expenditures and time, but once you're in office, you better try to get the facts and do what's in the national interest. You can't always be sure you're making the right decisions, no matter how hard you try or how careful you are to try to get your facts straight, but I think it's a lot better than just sitting back and looking to the latest polling results.
You're, after you lost Shirley, you ultimately remarried Eloise Bowenbach.
Yes.
And that's a new chapter in your life.
Yes. Irvin and Eloise have been friends of ours for a long time. Irvin was a pilot who often flew me around and over the state for meetings when I was a candidate. And I think sometimes after I was governor, although the governor had his plane of his own. But Eloise and I have had a good 5 or 6 years together. She's not well right now, but she's getting better.
Good. Well, I think we've come to the end of the time here. I appreciate your sitting down with us. Really, Henry Bellmon is one of our most distinguished graduates, maybe our most distinguished graduate, and you're certainly one of the most distinguished Oklahomans of all time, and I'm proud to say you're my friend.
Well, thank you. You're my friend.
Thank you.
I wish you well as the new president.
Thank you. I'll need it.
You got your hands full.
Well, we're here in Henry Bennett's hideaway office at the Edmund Lowe Library, and he never got to use this office. He died in the plane crash in Iran, but you consider it yours and come back anytime.
Well, I'm glad you're willing to take care of my papers.
We are.
Hope somebody gets some good out of them. We were told when we made this agreement that the library would even like to have the content of our wastebasket, so you've got a lot of stuff here.
Well, good. We can use it. Thank you very much.